The first time I saw Srila Prabhupada was a real eye-opener. Of course, I'd heard about him, I'd seen his picture, I'd seen the devotees on the street, and I'd heard him chanting, and I'd been visiting the temple. You know, I was a rock musician trying to make it in London. I'd gone to London trying to make it as a famous musician. But I kept seeing the devotees everywhere, and I was attracted, started going to the temple. Then 1973, Prabhupada was coming, and for Rath Yatra. So this was the first time I was ever going to see him. So it started at noon at Marble Arch, and I arrived there just a little bit late. The procession had already started, and I went to the front of the procession, and Prabhupada was dancing on the road, surrounded by a circle of devotees. That was in 1973. He was 77 years old. He danced the whole way. It's about a 4 or 5 mile route. He danced the whole way, and I was just standing there watching, and it was like really ecstatic. And sometimes he would stop. He'd dance and he'd get a little further ahead than the cart, which normally happens. Then he'd stop and turn around and look at the cart and, you know, raise his arms up looking at Lord Jagannath. And the police, you know, when they see that the parade was stopped, then they get a little anxiety and they say, could you please ask the Swami to, you know, move it on? Oh yes, officer, but they never did, you know. And so he danced all the way. That was quite awe-inspiring, just to see a 77-year-old man filled with the ecstasy of Krishna Prema dancing the whole way. So, and then when they arrived at Trafalgar Square, they had a big ceremony, including a wedding, a fire yagya, a whole thing. So that was my first experience with Prabhupada, really grandiose and fantastic. And I remember one day they had a darshan. Everyone was packed into Prabhupada's room. And there were a lot of guests there, and some of them were challenging. And I remember one time they were challenging Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was just sitting there, tolerating it. And I was getting agitated. You know, I was really getting agitated with these people, that they were speaking in a challenging way to Prabhupada. I couldn't control myself. Prabhupada was completely transcendental, but I got upset, and I made some comment, you know, real nasty comment to shut them up. I was trying, you know, because I had some feeling for Prabhupada. Prabhupada just looked at me, you know, very grave, didn't do anything. So those were my first experiences with my spiritual master. That was in London. But I was still a long-haired hippie, so I don't know what he thought of me, you know. I still wanted to make it as a musician, but I'd always be going to the temple. And I remember one time at Berry Place, I was there for Tulsi Puja, and Peter Sellers came in. You know, and he was very famous at the time, and he came in, you know, pranams like this, and he went down on his knees and bowed down to the deities and everything. There's a lot happening in London in those days. So. My most intimate association with Srila Prabhupada was in 1976 in November in Vrindavan. I was traveling with the Southeast Asia Library Party, and with Satyanarayan, and we had gone up to Kashmir, which is a Muslim, 90% Muslim district area. And we were going to the colleges there and the libraries and distributing books. So I found one library, an Oriental library, with an old gentleman there, and I was showing him the books, and he said, oh, I think I have these books. I said, no, it's not possible. It's the first time we've come here. He said, let me see. He went back, and he brought out Prabhupada's 3 original Bhagavatams. So I said, that's fantastic. And now we have, you know, you should take all the rest of them. So he took the whole, you know, all the rest, the whole complete set of Bhagavatams, Chaitanya Charitamrita, Gita, Krishna book, everything. So that was really nice. So he said that the author had come there personally. So that was far out. Nobody knew that Prabhupada had gone to Kashmir. So on our way back, driving back through the Himalayas, we passed an apiary where they had beehives and everything. And we were thinking, wow, wouldn't it be great to get Prabhupada some real Himalayan honey, the real thing. So we got a big bottle like that. And we knew that Prabhupada was in Vrindavan, so we wanted just to go straight back to Vrindavan and tell him that we were preaching in Kashmir and we'd distributed books, you know, in the Muslim areas, and the Muslim colleges had taken it and like that. So we arrived in Vrindavan, and Jagadish was Prabhupada's secretary at the time, and he knew me and Satyanarayan from Canada, in Toronto. He knew me, and he knew Satyanarayan from New York. So he said, okay, I'll try and arrange it. And then he came out a few minutes later and says, yes, Prabhupada will see you. So we came in, and Prabhupada was sitting with Gopal Krishna, and he was speaking to an Indian gentleman. And when we came in, he turned around and went like this and said, "Here are two very nice boys." So we came in, and we sat down, and Jagadish introduced us. And Satyanarayan spoke first and explained we'd been in Kashmir, and we preached and everything like this. We were the library party, and he was very pleased. We were distributing his books. And then his eyes opened really wide when he heard we were in Kashmir. He says, "Ah, Kashmir. I went to Kashmir." And he said, "Do you remember when you come over the crest of the hill and you see the Kashmir Valley?" "Yes, Prabhupada, we saw it." And he said, "Yes, I distributed my books there." So then I spoke up. I said, "Srila Prabhupada, I met that gentleman. He took your first 3 volumes. And then I distributed, after that, he took the whole set of your books, standing order." So that was nice to connect with Srila Prabhupada. So he was reminiscing about that. We spoke for about 5-10 minutes. And then what really stuck in my mind was just before we left, he looked me right, he was speaking about preaching and everything, the importance of preaching. Then he looked me right in the eye and he said, "So, wherever you go and whoever you meet, just tell them about Krishna. And in this way, you become Guru by Lord Chaitanya's order." And that really left a big, he was looking right at me. So when I left there, I thought, wow, if I don't tell people about Krishna, I'm in Maya, total Maya. So I thought, this is my mission. And we gave Prabhupada the bottle of honey, which he graciously accepted. And then Palika, who was his cook, she told us later that every morning Prabhupada used to like to have a little bit of that honey with his breakfast. So that was very nice. It was always wonderful to travel with Srila Prabhupada in an airplane. And the first time Srila Prabhupada went to Australia to bring the deities there, Vaiyasaki Prabhu was carrying one of the deities with him, with Srila Prabhupada. So they had packed their lunch. So when after the plane had taken off and it was time to take prasadam, they unfolded everything and Prabhupada served out and everyone was taking prasadam. And then when they finished, Prabhupada rinsed his mouth and washed his hands. And then he took out a toothpick and he started doing like this, cleaning his teeth. So Vaiyasaki was thinking, oh, this is what you do. You have to clean your mouth after you eat. So he goes down in his bag and he pulls out a toothbrush and toothpaste. Prabhupada says, "What you were doing?" "Well, I'm going to brush my teeth, Srila Prabhupada. I'm going to clean my teeth." He says, "That you do before you take prasad. After prasad, you use a toothpick, because those little pieces in your mouth, that's also prasadam." So ever since then, I always got toothpicks and I was always picking my teeth. Gargamuni told Srila Prabhupada that 2 of his men were distributing books. He did the library party to all the universities in Indonesia, Muslim country. And there were other devotees in Muslim countries at that time also. Padmapani and Tribhuvanath were in the Middle East, like that. So then Prabhupada was so pleased that devotees were going to preach in the Muslim countries. And he told Gargamuni, and Gargamuni told us, Prabhupada said, "Whoever preaches in the Muslim countries, I take the dust from their feet, put it on my head." So when he told us that, we were in ecstasy. So that was really wonderful. And it was actually, after we did, in Indonesia, we were first on the island of Java, and then from there we went to Bali. We did the libraries in Bali. And it was in Bali that I found out that Prabhupada had left the planet. That morning, because everywhere we went to, we'd divide up the colleges. So Satyanarayan went off to his college, and I was ready to go off to my college. But I just thought I'd call into Jakarta. There was one lady there, Arvindakshi Devi. She was acting as our secretary. And so I called in just to find out how things were going. The books were being sent out and this and that, And then she said, "Have you heard the news?" I said, "No. What? You didn't know?" "I didn't know." She said, "Prabhupada left the planet." I was shocked. I didn't know. She said, "I just heard from the devotees in Singapore." So I hung up the phone. I didn't know what to do. But I thought Prabhupada would want me to go and preach in this college. So I drove up there. It was on the other end of Bali. You have to go all the way through to the other side. It's a small island, but So I got there. This was amazing. I arrived in the college, met the librarian, and got the 2 standing orders. And then as I came out, I met, what was his name? He was the Minister of Culture in Jakarta, who we'd met about a month earlier trying to distribute the books to the library in the cultural ministry. I forget his name now. Anyway, he'll come back. So I met him at the college, just walking down the hall. And he said to me, "Have you heard about your Guru Maharaj?" And I said, "Yes, I did. Thank you." And I was amazed. Even in Bali, in this little village, in this small town, and everybody knew Prabhupada had left the planet. I was amazed. So I drove down to meet Satyanarayan, the other side of the island, and he hadn't heard. So I had to break the news to him. And we were in our room, and I told him, and immediately he broke down and just sobbed uncontrollably, crying and crying. And, you know, I had this realization that I'm so stone-hearted. You know, I hadn't broken down and sobbed. I mean, I was sad, and tears came to my eyes. But here, I just saw that Satyanarayan had so much love for Prabhupada. He was crying and sobbing. I just really respected him, and I felt if only I could have such a relationship. You know, if only I could have felt that. So that was my experience of Prabhupada leaving the planet. After Prabhupada had left, devotees were collecting memories of Srila Prabhupada, and no one had gone to see his godbrother, Dr. O.B.L. Kapoor. So I decided to go to see Dr. Kapoor when I was in Vrindavan one time and ask him about his memories of Srila Prabhupada. And he gave me a very beautiful story. He knew Srila Prabhupada when he was uninitiated, Abhay Babu, who owned the Day's Pharmacy in Allahabad. And he was a graduate student at the university there, and he had met his spiritual master, Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, and taken initiation from him. And he was the first non-Bengali to do that. So when Prabhupada moved there, one day in the pharmacy, a sannyasi walked in, isn't it, Tirtha Maharaj, and he said, "Oh, we have heard your name." Because Prabhupada had met him in Calcutta, and he'd been studying the books, and you know, he was already a devotee, but not initiated. "And we've heard your name. We want to establish a mutt here. Will you help us?" So Prabhupada was very thrilled to help. So gradually the mutt was started, and Prabhupada used to come and play, you know, and chant, and play mridanga and chant bhajans and everything, and everyone really liked him, and he enjoyed being in their association. So the young Adi Keshava Das, Dr. O.B.L. Kapoor, Prabhupada especially was very warm to him, and he said, because I was the only non-Bengali there. So the acquaintance turned into friendship, and friendship turned into brotherhood. And he was 13 years younger than Prabhupada, but he used to come all the time to the pharmacy and to ask questions, discuss Krishna Katha, like that, and they became really close. So one day when he came, Prabhupada handed him a vial. Said, "Here, take this vial, this tonic. This would be very good for your health." So Dr. Kapoor said, "Yes, I will take this, thank you very much. But why you don't give me the tonic that you're taking?" So Prabhupada said, "Well, what tonic is that?" He said, "You know, the tonic of Krishna Prem." Prabhupada laughed. He said, "Well, I don't have that tonic, but I do know the formula." And Dr. Kapoor said, "Well, if it's not a secret, perhaps you can share it with me." He said, "Yes, I can share it with you. It is not a secret. The formula is Trinadapi Sunichena Taroriva Sahishnana Amanina Manadena Kirtanaya Siddhahari, and I shall spread it the whole world over." So Trinadapi Sunichena, more humble than the grass. Taroriva Sahishnana, more tolerant than the tree. Amanina Manadena, not desiring any respect for myself, but desiring to give all respect to others. Kirtaniya Siddhahari, in such a state of mind, one can chant the holy name of the Lord constantly. So at the time, Dr. Kapoor thought he was just making a casual pronouncement. But he told me, now that I look back over the years, I realized that even at that time, he had a plan like that. He was thinking like that. I shall spread it the whole world over. So I was thinking how Prabhupada said this is the formula to get Krishna Prem. And Srila Prabhupada was the embodiment of that verse. So I want to give some of Srila Prabhupada's pastimes to show how he embodied that verse. So, Trinadapi Sinechena, more humble than the grass. This is a pastime that Srila Prabhupada performed in New York in July 1972. It was just around it was actually the July 4th holiday weekend. And devotees had come from all over the East Coast, from far south as Miami, as far north as Montreal and Toronto, as far west as Chicago and St. Louis. And there were thousands of devotees in the New York temple. And then when Prabhupada was to leave, so many devotees drove him to the airport. And they went with him into the departure lounge. You just see him to the last second. So the departure lounge was filled with devotees. Now, the airport officials had a problem because there was no room for the passengers who were booked on the plane to come into the departure lounge. So one of the officials looked around and spotted Rabindra Sarup, who was kind of a tall person, and explained the situation to him and asked him if he could ask your people to kindly leave so that persons who are on the plane can come in to the departure lounge and to board their flight. So he said, okay. He had understood the situation and went and spoke to a couple of devotees, but no one was having any of that. I'm not leaving, no way. Then he realized that he's not going to get anywhere. Now, Rupanuga had just taken sannyas in May of that year, so he was a new sannyasi and he was a GBC. So Rabindra approached Rupanuga and explained the situation to Rupanuga and asked him if he could take care of it. So Rupanuga immediately, okay, done. So he got up one of the chairs and he said, attention all devotees. We now have to leave the departure lounge to make room for the incoming passengers. So all devotees, please get up and leave the departure lounge. No one did anything. Everyone just sat there, looked at him, except for one person, Srila Prabhupada. He got up and started to walk out. And Rupanuga said, no, not you, Srila Prabhupada. He was so humble. When he heard that devotees should get up and leave, he got up to leave. And no one else did. So this is the symptom of humility, more humble than the grass. He was the only humble Vaishnava in that assembly. Taroriva Sihishnuda, more tolerant than the tree. This pastime took place in 1975 when Prabhupada was going for the first time to South Africa after he had been in Kenya. And he was flying on the plane, and on that plane was the South African football team who had just played in Kenya. So they were a rowdy bunch, and they'd won the match, and they were kind of, happy and upbeat. So after the plane took off, the stewardesses came around, they were serving drinks, and these guys were taking their drinks and getting a little high and a little rowdy, lighting up cigarettes. Now, it's a non-smoking cabin that they were in. So Pushta Krishna, who was Prabhupada's secretary, was sitting next to Prabhupada, Pushta Krishna Maharaj at that time. He got a little disturbed. This is not very nice. Why Prabhupada should be subjected to this? So he pressed the call button to call for the stewardess. And she came and he explained very nicely, this is the non-smoking area, and could you please ask them to extinguish their cigarettes? So she agreed. She asked these football players to extinguish their cigarettes, which they did do. Then she left. But after a few minutes, they lit up again because they were really drunk. So now, Pushta Krishna could see that he wasn't going to get anywhere with the stewardess. So he decided he was going to take matters into his own hands. So he got up, and he was going to get heavy with these guys. And Srila Prabhupada said, oh, where you were going? She said, well, they're smoking, Srila Prabhupada. Sit down. And then Srila Prabhupada looked him right in the eye and said, what is the difference between us and them if we cannot tolerate? So Prabhupada tolerated the cigarette smoke and the rowdiness and everything. He was undisturbed. And he said, what is the difference between us and them if we cannot tolerate? So the pure devotee, the Vaishnava, he exemplifies this. Taroriva Sahishnura, more tolerant than the tree. And then amanina manadena, not desiring any respect for himself or any honor, but desiring to give all respect and honor to others. So pastime, this was just end of 1975 and 76. I think it was January 76. I had arrived in Bombay December 75. And at that time, the Bombay temple was just a hole in the ground with the foundation. And Prabhupada's rooms at that time was at the back of the property, which are now the BBT building. So Prabhupada had come early January 76, I believe, sometime in January. And he wanted to really get this project moving. So the next morning after breakfast prasadam, he had a big meeting in his rooms with all the people who were involved in doing this project, and the sannyasi, the GBC temple president, all the people, everybody. So they're in the room having this big important meeting. Then up the stairs comes the cleaning lady, a Bungi lady from the Bungi colony, not far from the temple. And she has her little balti, the wooden bucket, and her daru, the straw broom, because she comes up every day and cleans the rooms. So she comes up to the top of the landing, and the door is slightly ajar. So she looks through and she sees Prabhupada there speaking, and all, you know, all the devotees and the architects and the contractors and everything. So she can't go in, but she can't not do her service. She can't go down and forget about it, because that 1 rupee feeds her children. She needs it, so she doesn't know what to do. So she's just standing there. Meanwhile, Prabhupada's speaking, and as he turns his head to the right, he sees through the door that's ajar, he sees the cleaning lady standing there. So immediately he stops the discussion. He says, now we have to stop. The cleaning lady has come. When it's her time to clean, then she's the authority here. Everyone has their area of authority. And when it's her time to clean, she's the authority. So we have to get up and leave. So they got up and leave. So the Jagat Guru recognized the authority of that cleaning lady. Amanina amanadena, giving all respect to others and not desiring any for himself. In this way, Kirtaniya Sadahari, one is able to chant the holy name of the Lord constantly, which we always saw. Srila Prabhupada always chanting the holy name of the Lord constantly. So here we see that Prabhupada was the embodiment, the personification of that verse, which he said many years back, he had explained to his godbrother that this was the formula to get Krishna prema. And he would spread it the whole world over, and he was the embodiment of that.